This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
And you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcasts. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to the podcast. 50th episode today, Tommy.
I know, wow, crazy. We were just talking about that. 50 episodes. It doesn't seem like that many. I don't think I could name all 50.
I can't actually. I was thinking the same thing. Like, I actually cannot name all 50 episodes. Like, I forget. And sometimes I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe it would be cool if we did this. And then I think about it, like, I feel like we talked about that. And then, like, sure enough, like, I'll look over back and I'll be like, oh, yeah, we definitely talked about that. So, yeah, 50 seems like a long time. And this is crazy, but I'm pretty sure we started in August of 2020 when we were, like, COVIDed out. Mm-hmm. And August is coming up, so like,
yeah, we're approaching a year. That's strong. True,
yeah, we never missed a week, man.
1 year anniversary episode. Yeah,
I know, right? We've been on fire with this.
There you go.
So I guess let's continue being on fire.
Let's continue the trend, right? Keep the streak going. Let's see, right?
That's right. Okay. We can do this. All right. So what are we talking about today, Tommy?
Well, we figured it had to be something interesting or something big. And since, we're both history teachers and we deal with this stuff, and happened just a few days ago was the anniversary, I guess, of this, right? So today we're going to be looking at the signing of and a little bit about the Declaration of Independence. Really something that I guess everyone's heard of. You're not living in this country, like any country, not heard of the Declaration of Independence, the United States Declaration of Independence. But how much do people really know about it? Like, if you really stop people on the street, tell me something about the Declaration of Independence, they might say a few, though. It was signed on July 4th, 1776, or
and then actually signed it. And like, we'll talk about it. Exactly, right? We'll talk about
there's some debate. There's debate. I don't want to start saying in absolutes one way or the other, because then we're going to start getting hate mail. But
no hate mail.
It's not as simple as a lot of those movies make it seem and stuff like that. And there actually is a watermark, a hidden message on the Declaration.
On the back of it. Yes, there is. It is not a map, however. It is
not a map. It's not Nicolas Cage National Treasure. What is it? I guess we can. It just says, original copy, Declaration of Independence.
That's literally all it says. Like, you totally like, you filled that up. Like, it was like, whoa. Yeah, I mean, but it literally says original copy.
That's a lot of things in history, right? People always talk about, this is that could be a podcast, right? These myths of history, that there's all this stuff on. Like, they say Napoleon was short. Actually, he was average for that time period. It wasn't.
Yeah, wasn't he like 5'7" or something?
Yeah, it was totally normal for that time period. But they always show him like he's this tiny little guy. Like, no, that wasn't the case.
I mean, I guess
comparatively,
yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
But that's something for another time. But a lot of times, I guess we hype things up and then it's just like, kind of like the new Star Wars movies. You get hyped up and then it's just like, okay, fair enough.
That's starting to be like a common trend here. We always somehow fall into that. So we'll talk about, obviously, the Declaration of Independence. We'll talk about what it says. We'll talk about the background of how we got to the Declaration of Independence and why there is a Declaration of Independence. We'll then get into some of pretty much the fun facts of it. We'll talk about the signing itself and the drafting of the document. And then, the biggie. Yeah. Like, who signed this thing? I mean, there's 56 individuals that signed this Declaration of Independence, and we'll talk about some of them today, if not all. I mean, I'm not sure.
They were signing I mean, like, I know we talk about it and we'll get into it in more detail, but they're signing their death warrant basically by putting their name to this paper, because now their name is there. And this is like a big...
treason. This was an act of treason.
This is a middle finger to the king. I mean, that's it.
Yeah. Not to mention that treason at this time by the British, by the crown, was punishable by death. I mean, like you said, these guys were literally like, all right, well, and here's John Hancock, like, in case you can't see it, bam. Yeah. But let's get going here. So, brief background. Yeah, right. Brief background told this. Obviously, why are we declaring independence? You guys have, listening to this, probably remember this from school, but ultimately, yeah, right. The United States was initially 13 British colonies. I'm not going to get into that. However, the 13 British colonies start to, after the French and Indian War, England, who as a nation fights this war, it's a global war, but a lot of it is fought here in the colonies, and they go into massive debt in 1760s because of this war. And as a result, the belief is that the colonists should pay for some of that, which in turn changes British policy towards the colonies to be a lot more assertive. And they really want money from the colonies, but they also want the colonists to take some responsibility for governing themselves in a sense, and for kind of being part of the British Empire. Naturally, what happens is prior to this, the British crown kind of ignored the colonies. And during this time, the colonists got to kind of discover their own freedoms in a sense. They started to have local assemblies. And yeah, each state, or rather each colony, had a governor. However, the governor controlled or ruled each colony together with a local assembly that was elected by local wealthy, essentially wealthy planters and
Well, that's
or
really well how this was.
explorers.
It was the wealthy landowners. A lot of like
Elite.
these,
Yeah.
yeah, the elite. A lot of like, particularly in the South, who just not even wealthy, but just live there. Like the people who
Yep.
tenant farmers, whatever you want to call them, woodsmen. They were just like, we don't care one way or the other.
Yep.
Like, and I had that a lot of people, at least early on, they didn't really care one way or the other because they were like, what's the point? If the king is all the way over there. What are the British really going to do to me?
Yep.
I'm literally an ocean away.
Yep. And what essentially happens, as you kind of alluded to here, is when England starts to pass all these things and make us do all these things, we ignore them. We ultimately, we boycott British goods when they started raising taxes. And again, we're not going to get into the American Revolution part, but what ultimately happens is between the taxes, the suppression of land regulations, proclamation of 1763, the colonists finally get fed up with what they believe to be oppressive British policies. What ultimately happens is this is kind of unprecedented because up to this point, the 13 colonies very much lived as if there were 13 separate countries. If you didn't say you were an American colonist, you said you were a New Yorker, you were a New Jerseyan, you were a Virginian. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what they identify themselves as. Absolutely.
absolutely. When things started getting really bad with England in 1760s and 70s, they decided to actually send representatives from each one of these colonies to meet up to discuss what they should do. And this is where we get this idea of a continental congress, which is kind of a precursor to, our Congress with representatives. But the reason why we were bringing this up is because these are the guys, these representatives, that actually not write, because we'll get into who writes the Declaration of Independence, but come up with this idea of having a Declaration of Independence. One of the first things they do as a Second Continental Congress is when they get together, the American, and this is the elite, right? Tom, you alluded to that. Like these are the who's who of every colony.
These are not the average Joes. They
No.
know there's no they know what's going on and things of that nature. And no one is, no one doesn't know there's not issues going on in England, but they kind of feel like, well, there's always been issues. Yeah, no one wants to be taxed and things like that.
Yep.
But again, it's gaining steam now, right? So they're meeting in the Second Continental Congress, and
Yep.
they decide basically. You wanted to, I guess, just jump into it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could jump into it
Why
because
not?
ultimately the
Yeah.
goal is we don't want independence initially. We just want England to be nice to us, and then
Well, they said things. They have like the Olive Branch petition,
exactly.
things like that, and it's not going anywhere. Basically, the King George III basically decides, you know what, I'm not dealing with them.
Yep.
Like he wants to make a stand. He wants to, show an example who are these colonists and things like that. We fought this war, the French Indian War, and stuff like that. They kind of protect them, and now they're not really repaying us and things, and that they're not showing their loyalty to the crown. So he's all in on this too. He's setting it by
Yep.
force. He wants to put down this rebellion. And so that's why they realized they have to have this declaration. And the Declaration of Independence was, I like to always describe it, it was designed for more than one audience, right? A bunch of people. One, the king. They want the king to see this. The colonists themselves, right? To rally the
Yep.
troops, basically, and the world. All right. So it was designed to multitask. Okay. They wanted to rally troops to get people to jump in, but also they wanted people to really understand why they were declaring this independence, to try to win foreign allies. They know they're not beating England, which at this time is the most powerful nation on earth. They're not beating
Yes.
England by themselves. So they need help. All right. So if you really look at the declaration and really break it down, the first couple sentences states the main purpose: to explain to the colonists their right to revolution, right? These clauses which impel them to the separation, right? And then Congress basically has to prove the legitimacy of their cause. And then they also need to motivate people to really, the allies, to come and join the fight, which they are going to do. And basically everyone gets in, all the other countries that don't like England get involved in this war in some way, shape, or form. You can call it a
Yes.
world war. You could easily call
Yeah,
this a
you
world
could.
war.
You could. I think. I mean, the same could be said for French and Indian War that came, a few decades
Yeah, well,
before it. I
absolutely.
would say.
Absolutely.
the one thing you kind of mentioned here is the Declaration of Independence itself, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but it's broken into parts. You have kind of like the
Yeah, you have
like
the
the
preamble. And,
introduction
and
as
that's
to
probably the most. Well,
to
you know these words though.
yeah, we hold these
You've heard
truths
these
just to be
before. We
self-evident,
hold
right?
these
These
truths to be
passages.
self-evident, right? That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, these are the words that they put together to really convince Americans, colonists, to put their lives on the line for this new cause. And that separation from England basically threatened their sense of security, it threatened their economic stability, their identity. So the preamble was another way of really kind of like to inspire and unite the colonists, right? These early Americans through the idea of basically like a better life. Like, yeah, things might be okay now, but they can be better
Yep.
with independence. Things are going to be better when we're not under the crown. So they're
Yep.
like, oh, okay. You know,
And I
it
mean, they
was
had
kind
to sell this. They had to
of,
because you're talking about fighting against the
otherwise it's
most
just,
powerful country in the world. Like,
otherwise it's just a bunch of old men. Well, some of them were younger, but it's a bunch of
yeah,
just, guys in a hot room, deciding to do
yeah.
this.
Like, hey. But a lot of people like kind of skip that we hold these hold these truths self-evident that all men are created equal. But the line that follows is that we have these unalienable rights. And among there are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And unalienable rights, I kind of want to get into this a little bit. These are because there's an idea between civil rights and natural rights. And what
There's
Thomas
a
Jefferson
difference. Yeah.
writes here is he writes about the natural rights. These are rights that all men, and at the time, unfortunately, they did mean men. However, it has been interpreted because as a society and as as the world, we've moved forward. So mankind is granted
Or white
certain
men too.
natural
Let's
rights.
just say white men
Yeah, back
also.
then, yeah. So,
I
oh,
heard there was. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there was
go.
talk of like, should we include just white men? Should it say white men? Apparently, there was discussions of that,
Yep.
and they
Yep.
knew like this is going to create a problem if we don't say that. But they're like, that's a problem we'll deal with when we have to deal with it. And obviously, it becomes a problem. You have to have a war
Well, yeah. And
to
I
kind
mean,
of
they also
deal with
didn't
that.
want to do
But
it because they didn't want to alienate half of the
they,
colonies that were mostly Southern. I mean,
yeah,
that's
they needed
ultimately
the
what we're
South.
getting at.
This wasn't going to work unless every colony was on board.
Exactly. Like
If
all
any
in,
colony
all
says
out.
no, it's done. And you had a
Yep.
lot of people that don't get involved too, which
Yeah. Well,
everyone
and
knows
we'll
the
get into that,
royalists.
I think. But life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, these are rights that human beings are born with, meaning that you just by sheer fact that you're a human being, you have the right to live. No one should have the right to take your life away. You have the right to be free. No one should enslave you. And again, they're talking about white men here. And pursuit of happiness really meant this, like almost like what becomes the American dream, which is the ability to move forward and have social mobility in life. So these are things that Thomas Jefferson wrote in here, stating that governments, which is the next line, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Right? He says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, meaning that the only reason we have a government, we listen to our leaders, is because they promise to secure these rights we are born
Yeah.
with.
And the
These
people give
rights,
the government the
life,
power. That's basically
exactly,
what it
life,
is.
liberty, pursuit of happiness. These are not
If the
civil
people,
rights. Civil rights are granted by governments. These are not it. These are rights that you're born with. The government's supposed to protect them. And he says that if any government ceases to fulfill that duty, which is the only reason we give government power, then we as a people have the right to abolish it. And that's kind of that's the premise of this whole declaration is look, this is how we justify the fact, philosophically, obviously, that we can abolish this British government.
yeah, that what they're doing is basically not treason. It's because that's how they're arguing too. This isn't treason. We're sticking up for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to better our lives. It's not
Yeah.
treason. That's the one thing they really, because a lot of these, the colonists wouldn't want to be along with that sort of
Yeah.
idea. And they list all their grievances too.
And
There's a
that's
list
kind of
of
what a lot of people don't
27
realize. This document, what
complaints.
is this document really in the grand scheme of things, Tom?
Well, I always taught at least the AP government. It's the breakup letter
Yep.
to King George. It's his breakup letter, and these are the reasons why we broke up with you. Right? There's 27 complaints
Yeah.
against him.
Like most of it is literally a complaint against King George.
Yeah, this is why. You left the toilet seat up. Now I'm leaving you. Sorry.
It's
That
nuts,
sort
though,
of
right? It's like a list.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you always think it's such an eloquent document, and it starts off as an eloquent document, but then really it's just like
It just
it's a
breaks down to a
list of
list. Yes.
complaints. Like, dude, you're terrible because A, B, C, D, E,
Yeah,
F,
it
G.
just goes
Like
into that. And then I guess the most important statement comes near the end, right? When he says
what
that
else?
these
Yeah,
united colonies are and the right ought to be free independent states. and that's basically
Yep.
now we are our independent states. A
Yep.
complete break with Great Britain, and it claims that the king's powers no longer exist because they're an independent country.
Yep.
Now, it's just a
So how
piece of
does
paper declaring that.
Yep. So
But
how does Thomas Jefferson get involved in all this? Like, how do we get Thomas Jefferson to be the one to write this document?
well, there's a bunch of Jefferson is basically the one that he's a big supporter of. Member of what's that guy you talking about? Paine, right? Common
Yep.
sense.
Tom. Yep. But
What else?
also, the thing is that Thomas Jefferson was super super
Well, he
quiet.
was
He was very
intelligent.
shy. He was this
He's well
redhead
respected.
dude, very well respected. Very young. He was like 33, I believe,
He
when
was
he
one of the
actually.
youngest. I think the youngest was 26, right?
Yeah, but he's still
But
33 to
he
write
was
the
there.
Declaration of Independence. So he's a young guy. He's in his early 30s. He's super quiet, but is very, very eloquent. I don't want to say exuberant speeches, but his essays have already been published, and he's known as
He
a
was well
great
known.
writer.
He was well known at this time. He has that name recognition, right?
Yet, when
He
you're
was the
looking at
Virginia
this,
House of Delegates. I mean,
yes,
he's known.
and Virginia's like the granddaddy of all these colonies here.
Yeah, Virginia's the big shot. Yeah,
Yes. But initially, Ben Franklin and John Adams are kind of tapped to write this document. Like these guys are sitting in a room, they're complaining. They're like, we have an official breakup. We have to write something that we could send to the king. And ultimately, they turn to the most famous American, and that is Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin is the one that's kind of supposed to do it. And then they look at John Adams, and John Adams, he's an attorney. He's a very famous attorney, actually, at the time
wasn't
already.
Franklin like kind of blind by that time and stuff
Yeah,
like
he was
too?
like super old. He was
He
the
wasn't the
oldest.
best of health. They're saying a lot of times he was there more as kind of just like a oversee everything, kind of like a figurehead. Like at
Yeah,
least he had the respect people would listen to him. But as far as like
yeah. Well, by the
putting down his
Constitution
ideas on
time,
paper,
by Constitution, he was like
yeah, fine
non-existent.
Constitution. Yeah, I forget. He wasn't. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. He was like naked
Yeah,
during the Constitution time.
yeah. Well,
That's the
they
time.
had to like
That's a whole
bring
other
him.
thing.
They had to like carry him in there.
Wheel him in there. Yeah.
Nonetheless, right? So he is definitely the oldest one, but so he's the one. Him and John Adams are like, hey, listen, like we may be smart and all that stuff, but like we think Thomas Jefferson's going to do a better job writing this. So,
Well, he was well educated too. Like Jefferson, I think what they say he could speak. He could speak several languages.
oh yeah,
He wrote over 16,000 letters, like they said during his time, and he was definitely a like a Renaissance man of that time, more or less.
yep,
But he was a smart guy, and he had
yep.
an education, like an actual formal education that rivaled even like the aristocrats in England.
But then what happens is when so these guys set on their way, and it's a whole committee, right? So you have John Adams, you have Ben Franklin, you have Thomas Jefferson, and was it Randolph? Was the other guy that no one ever remembers? I want to say it was
Yes,
Randolph.
it was Randolph.
They were the committee to actually write the document down, right? So Thomas Jefferson, very skillful, crafted prose. He's kind of chosen by this committee. They're like, hey, you do it. So he does it. And I always like to say this that like he plagiarized the crap out of this. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
if
he's pulling from all
of all
sorts of
kinds
stuff.
of play. I mean, again, philosophy though, like he's pulling this from philosophy.
Oh
But
yeah,
the biggest one I think was obviously John Locke, which is he's an English philosopher, and he's the one that stems with that idea of natural rights, life, liberty, and he calls property his third one. And Jefferson kind of tweaks that a little bit, but he basically looks at Locke's idea. It was Locke, this English philosopher, that said that governments are only instituted from the consent of the governed to protect these rights. So, like, whole justification for independence was actually someone else's thoughts. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, in today's terms, like if you're writing for history purposes, you would simply put that in your notes and make sure that you have that in your bibliography and you don't plagiarize. In this case, he didn't really do that. He didn't put an end note,
no,
but we know exactly where it came from because you could find Locke's readings. The Declaration itself states very flatly that all men are created equal. And at the time, what that meant is the common belief that free citizens were political equals. It did not claim that all people had the same abilities or they ought to have the same equal
no.
wealth. Like that
It
was
just says
key.
politically you're equal. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It says that you have the same, like you said before, these are the inalienable rights. These are the rights you have as a human being. You
Yep.
have these. It doesn't mean that you're all going to be as successful. It doesn't mean anything of that nature.
Another thing that's kind of interesting is when he comes up with his first draft, because he's written a few drafts, and actually he would send these drafts to other people in Continental Congress, like, "Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?" And some of these drafts have survived. We actually have them. The United States government,
Yeah, they have.
National Archives, they have his drafts. And that's how we know for a fact that he actually his first draft. And again, we all know Jefferson as a slave owner and a very um, controversial figure when it comes to that.
Controversial figure. There's a lot to do with Jefferson. Yes.
Yep.
One day we'll definitely have to do the Jefferson podcast.
Absolutely. And he actually writes this like eloquent attack on the cruelty and injustice of the slave trade. There's a whole paragraph
Yeah.
in here where he's kind of talking about how, this new nation should not be based off of slavery. And this is interesting because, again, he was a slave owner at the time. Now, the issue is that South Carolina and Georgia were the main states, the representatives from South Carolina and Georgia, that kind of protested this. And they're like, listen, we're our economy is completely based off of slavery. So they flat out said, South Carolina and Georgia, that they would never sign this declaration if that paragraph was included. So to gain the votes of these two states, Jefferson, meets with Adams and Franklin, and they're like, yeah, you got to take it out. So
There's no way. There was no way out. They were not going to get every colony supporting with that
yeah,
statement in there. It just wasn't going to happen.
yep. So on July 2nd, this is the key, 1776, the delegates finally vote to unanimously.
Well, it's not unanimously. Well,
Well,
it is.
initially it's
It's
not.
12. It's 12.
By the
It's
second
12
though,
out of
isn't it over
13. But
13?
what happened was 12 of them say yes. New York abstains, doesn't vote no.
That's what it
Says
was.
we weren't given the authority by our assembly to vote for independence or not. The other 12 were, and New York does eventually vote for independence. Just at that moment, they do not.
And we should also mention that at that very moment, New York was literally occupied by the British Army.
That was one reason. Yeah,
That was
they knew if they do that. There's about 10,000 redcoats in the city. When the city
Yeah.
only had about 20,000 people,
Yep.
so that
No, that was the headquarters of the British. So yeah,
it was not something really smart to be like, yeah, we're going to declare independence. Yeah, let's wait till we get out of New York, then we'll say New York declares independence.
Now we should also say that this was July 2nd when these guys decided that colonies will be free.
Yes,
Not
but
July 4th. And John Adams was like, he actually wrote this in his diary, like July 2nd will forever be celebrated in American history. And that didn't happen. So why is it July 4th, Tom?
well, that's when they decided to actually sign it.
Yes.
That's when they authenticated it, particularly when the president of the Continental Congress, John Hancock, signs it. That's one reason why he signs it so big and bold. And it's always that later, even King George can see it without his bifocals. Whether he said that or not, who knows, right? But that's what he kind of writes on it. And then everyone else starts to sign from there. But that's when it is actually signed. That's when these delegates are not just, they're putting their names to this document, when it's becoming quote unquote official, right? That they're declaring their independence. Even though really it means nothing. Like, let's face it, if the British win the war, Declaration of Independence means you don't even hear about it. It's a footnote, if anything.
Yep, absolutely. But even like the signing itself, there was the official copy of the Declaration of Independence. It was printed on July 4th, 1776, right? And it was printed under Jefferson's supervision. And that was sent to the states and to the army and was like wildly reprinted.
There's about 200 of them made, right? The printing shop of someone known as John Dunlap. And that's why the original ones are known as the Dunlap broadsides.
Absolutely.
Right? They're the ones that are out that they were sent to, like the different states. George Washington gets one. They actually sent some to Britain.
They do, which were actually found recently. Somewhere found. One was found in like West Sussex County Council in England found a copy of it in 2017. They're like, what?
Yeah, by September, it started being translated into like German and stuff like that. And the first copy, I think, was lost in France. And then the second copy arrived in November.
But the one copy that was actually officially signed, like hand signed by Congress, is known as the engrossed or the parchment copy. And by what engrossed means that it was like carefully handwritten. Basically, it was a nice, slowly handwritten paper. And this is kind of interesting. I'm sure you saw this, that this copy, first of all, through 1800s, no one really cared for it that much. So the ink started fading because no one like really cared for it until like 1800, like late 1800s are like, oh, we should probably preserve this. Now, also in 1921, the custody of this engrossed copy of the Declaration was transferred from the State Department to the Library of Congress, along with the United States Constitution as like the original documents. But then, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, I
Yeah,
don't know if you read
they're
this.
locked.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
they were locked
documents.
away at Fort. They were when they escorted right to Fort
Yeah,
Knox,
they were moved for safekeeping at
just to
Fort
be sure.
Knox, where they were kept there until 1944, and then it was transferred over. The Declaration was transferred over to 52 to the National Archives, where it now sits on a permanent display. I've been to DC so many times. I have never seen the Declaration of
I've never
Independence.
seen either. I was at the in Philadelphia where they have the table that was signed on
Oh, that's kind of cool.
in the Pennsylvania. So you can go there and see actual. You can be in the actual room, right? They have the table and so
Well,
that.
I've been to that. I've been at the Independence Hall,
Yeah,
which is
depends
so
on.
weird because when you go to Independence Hall, like as I was driving up, I'm like, oh, there it is, and it's like surrounded by like modern Philly. It's just like this
Yeah,
little building, and every time you see pictures of it, you think it's like this grand,
and they're
huge.
small. Yeah, and how they have all
It's
these yeah
tiny.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's
Well, that gets
tiny.
to like what we're talking about is actually, I guess. Well, what do you want to get to now with the Declaration? I don't mean to
I
step
mean,
on
I think let's
your
let's
seat
talk about.
here.
I don't know. I mean, we'll talk about Declaration. So let's talk about some of the stuff like before we get into who signed it. What are some fun facts that we know about this Declaration of Independence?
Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but I think one of the interesting ones is too that at no time do historians believe that all 56 delegates were actually there at the same time.
Yes,
So that's like a
absolutely.
huge thing. Even though I think John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, they kind of say that happens, right? That's kind of become
Hmm.
the narrative of history. But looking back, a lot of the people who signed it weren't even delegates at that time, or they weren't. They were definitely not in Philadelphia at that time. They're saying that at most had about 31, maybe up at most 33 people were actually there in Independence Hall signing it at that time.
Yep.
The other one signed it later on, and that the actual Declaration of Independence, when you get all the signatures on it, doesn't happen until sometime in August,
Except
August
one.
2nd.
Thomas McKean of Delaware was actually the last person to sign it, and they say as late as 1777.
Yeah, I saw
But
that too. Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those footnotes of history, but like, and it's not going to change anything. July 4th is going to be July 4th. That's when the independence was announced, right?
also, like, so
Because
people
that's what
that
happens.
signed it, like there was two 26-year-olds from South Carolina, both of them were the youngest to sign the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Lynch Jr. and Edward Rutledge. Then Ben Franklin was 70, and he was the oldest member to sign it. Eight of the men of the 56 were born in Britain. There were all of these 56 guys. They were all lawyers, businessmen, farmers, teachers, and one minister, John Witherspoon of New Jersey. Ta-da.
Mhm.
Nine of these signers died before independence was officially won. Right. So technically,
That makes
the
sense.
independence is 1776, and we officially end this war in 1783. That's when the states kind of officially become independent. Nine of the signers died. Now, some in like weird, bizarre circumstances, which I think we'll kind of talk about when we talk about these guys.
Well, no, they said there's about today. There's 26 known copies
Hmm.
of the actual Declaration of Independence, these Dunlap broadsides that were printed. And there was a famous story I always like to tell my students. It was one that happened in 1989 in Amsterdam, Pennsylvania, Adamstown, Pennsylvania. And
Amsterdam. What do you want to go to
yeah, I don't
Amsterdam?
know. Yeah, I guess so. What happened was it was tucked behind this person's at a garage sale, right? Sees a picture frame, has a picture in it, but sees a picture frame. Oh, I like that picture frame. Buys it for $4. Rips out the picture that's in there, and in between the papers is actually a copy of the Declaration of Independence.
I would love to find something like that. This like reminds me of Goonies.
And he sold it to a TV producer for 8.1 million. But it's actually is a signed copy, one of these Dunlap broadsides. Crazy.
Man, I'm gonna start like going to garage sales,
Well,
getting some
you
old
got to be in that area.
paintings,
You got to
and
be in
ripping
that.
them
You got
up.
to be in that like Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area. Pet that Philadelphia area, really.
Dang it.
Go into some battles, see what you can find. But
I
that
love
was kind of
Philly.
interesting.
I was in Philly a couple years ago. We did like the horse-drawn carriage ride, the historic ride throughout Philly. It was really cool.
Did you run up the Rocky Steps, or you don't know that reference? Because it's a
I
sport.
do know that reference. Thank you very much. And yes, I did. And I even took a picture by the statue, which is at the bottom of those steps to the right. Or at least that's where it was when I was there.
Just making sure,
All right, all right, all right.
making sure you're aware. I know
Um,
you're a Rambo guy. I know if you're a Rocky guy.
remember we went to see Rambo, and at one point, like something happened with the screen, and then I went
Yes,
to
you
complain
got
about
very
it
upset.
because
Yeah.
I was like, I've been waiting so long for the newest Rambo movie, and this wasn't the newest Rambo movie, which is
No, it
actually
was like
really
that,
kind of not
that
good.
other new Rambo movie.
Yeah. And I walked out, and they tried to fix it and like shut off the entire screen.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember that people were not happy.
Yeah, but I remember when you stormed out during Star Wars and flipped out at people at the midnight show.
I didn't storm out.
Yeah, you
I
did
just,
because they were.
I, I
What was wrong with it?
there was something. I think the lights didn't go off or
No,
something
it
like
was
that.
in 3D. They put on the 3D one
Oh,
in a
that's right. Yeah,
regular
yeah.
showing, and
In a
then
regular
we
showing.
couldn't
Yeah.
see it. Yeah, yeah, I remember now. Anyway,
Something.
side
Anyway,
note.
getting back to real stuff.
Getting back to this. All
Um,
right, so let's talk about who. So some of these guys that signed this thing.
well, something I know one interesting fact about them and get into some of these guys was that 6 people that signed the Declaration of Independence, they also signed the Constitution.
Really, did not know that.
They kind of carried over. Like obviously Franklin was one of them. Um, Sherman, right, famous Robert Sherman
Jefferson
was one of
was
them.
not because Jefferson
Jefferson was not.
was
No,
he was in France
he was
at
in
the
France at the
time.
time. Yes.
So out of these guys that signed it, I mean,
Let's
56.
look at.
I'm not sure if we're going to go through 56.
No,
However, there's
I'm not.
some.
We're not going to go through all 56 of them.
No, there's some interesting ones though.
Just
The
if you want,
Virginia.
there's a memorial to them outside the National Mall in Washington D.C. that has
Really?
all their names on it. Yeah, it's by a reflecting pool. It's not far from the Vietnam Veterans Memorial.
Hmm.
It was created in 19. It was dedicated in July 2nd, 1984, and it
Really?
has all the names on it of the people who signed it. All
Again,
56
I've walked
delegates.
through there so many times, and I never knew it. So George Wythe, born 1726, died 1806. He was from Virginia, and he was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Came from a very wealthy agriculture family. The reason I'm mentioning him because I thought it was kind of interesting his life story. He was a member of House of Burgesses and a one-time Attorney General of Virginia before any of this happened. Then he becomes America's first law professor at the College of William and Mary. This guy's like kind of badass. His students were Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe and John Marshall. Like this guy taught them law, right? So there's George Wythe, I guess. Um, After declaring independence, he decided to free his slaves, and he willed part of his family property to one of his slaves. So obviously, this was super controversial, and his grandnephew, who was disinherited, decided that he's not going to have any of that. So he fatally poisons
Poison, yeah, with
this
arsenic.
former
Yeah.
slave, um, and George Wythe. Like he
Yeah.
poisons his
Well, he
like
wanted to make sure that he was upset because he was going to lose some of his inheritance. He realized that
so this
he
guy
was going to
died.
these slaves, so he tried to poison them, and he wound up poisoning George also. So he
Yeah,
died.
I thought that was kind of
80
crazy.
years old, which is pretty old for the time, obviously.
Yeah, but still, I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, I mean, there's a few weird deaths in here from the guys that signed it. All right,
Well,
what else?
You have John and Sam Adams, obviously, right? They're
Well,
very
we know
synonymous
those
with them.
guys.
Yeah.
Sam Adams, I feel like Sam Adams, obviously everyone knows Sam Adams from the beer, but Sam Adams was a troublemaker in all this. Like this guy
Yes. Yeah.
was the leader of the Sons of Liberty. He was, as far as the British are concerned, he was a terrorist that was part of a terrorist group that tarred and feathered British customs official, threw tea overboard the Boston Tea Party, caused a ruckus everywhere he went, basically harassed the British soldiers. That was Sam Adams, not John Adams. John Adams
Yeah.
was like the eloquent
He was more of a
attorney.
politician. He was more of a
Exactly.
politician.
Sam Adams
Sam
was like the,
he was
you
the
know,
he was the big mouth. Yeah.
yeah. So
He was
Sam Adams
definitely
in
the big
there.
mouth. Good friend of Thomas Paine too.
Yes.
How about from our home state here
Go.
of New Jersey? You have an individual by the name of John Witherspoon, and he brought a lot of impressive credentials to a lot of public acclaim. He was very well known at this time, and he was the president of the College of New Jersey, which is now Princeton.
Yep.
So that's some of the things that he did. And he was basically, in November of 76, he shut down and evacuated the college as the British soldiers actually started to come in, right, as they were approaching. And the British actually occupied the area and did a lot of damage to the college. They almost destroyed it. And following the war, he devoted his life to rebuilding the College of New Jersey, now Princeton. He served twice in the state legislature. So that was kind of the things that he was doing. So he voted in favor of the Declaration of Independence and made a notable comment on the occasion in a reply to other members who argued that the country was not yet ripe, not yet ready for this declaration, that in his opinion, it was not only ripe for measure, but in danger of rotting for the want of it. That was a kind of interesting little saying there. He was a very
Yep.
active member of Congress, served on a whole bunch of different committees and stuff during this time. So
Yep. Yep.
interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting because College of New Jersey, there's so many people that claim to be known as the College of New Jersey, and like you have TCNJ as well.
Well, but this is the
But this is
original.
this is the original College of New Jersey. Thomas Lynch Jr. of South Carolina, who was one of the youngest, again I mentioned that before, at 26, attended Cambridge University in England, studied law in London, came back home, is elected to Continental Congress as a representative of South Carolina, considering his education and background. He signs the Declaration of Independence. After that, he kind of becomes really sick. And his wife suggests, this is still in 1776, that maybe they should sail for the West Indies, like the Bahamas, Caribbean, and maybe that will like make him feel better.
Yeah,
So,
he was like the air
yeah,
and stuff. Yeah.
mere months after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, he gets on a ship with his wife. Ship disappears, and neither was ever heard from again. So this guy dies within mere months of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which I thought was kind of interesting.
One individual who signed it, but he couldn't sign by the other delegates of the state because there was not enough room. I think that was a lot. So he had to sign somewhere else. But here's another one that didn't. I mean, he died in 1778, so he didn't really get to see the whole result of everything either.
George Taylor from Pennsylvania, born in Northern Ireland, came to America when he was in his early 20s, became an ironmaster. So in 1775, he was appointed to take the place of a Pennsylvania delegate who refused to support the break with Britain. This is kind of interesting.
You had this law too. They got kind of remember you don't support it. All right, you're not part of this delegation anymore.
Yeah, to just like kick him out.
So that So I mean, it was political. They were able to work things around this.
Yeah, so they're like, you're going home. George Taylor's coming in, and anyway, he missed the vote for independence. He didn't make it in time, but he arrived in time to actually sign the document, George Taylor, because, again, his predecessor said, I don't want to sign this. They're like, you're out. Bring in George Taylor. A lot of these states, that now we'll call them states after the Declaration of Independence, what ultimately happened here is the only reason they're together, it's kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, they're only together for one purpose, and that is to survive this war against England. When it comes to anything else, like these guys make sure
they want nothing to do with each other.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of like hostility towards each other.
Absolutely. I mean, they form a government basically under the Articles of Confederation, which is concurrent. So another thing I always tell my students, we declare independence, and then what happens? So two things are happening concurrently. One is we're fighting an actual war to maintain that independence. And two, we are forming a government under which, because remember, we're a new country, right? Like we're trying to get, as you mentioned,
trying to be democratic, which is not
recognized
really
by the world,
known at this time.
So the government we create that is happening concurrent with this war we're fighting to get ourselves this independence is the Articles of Confederation, is under the Articles of Confederation. And it's basically like a loose constitution. Like we are
that's
together,
what Confederacy is. It's
not really
beneficial. It's a beneficial, but there's no strong federal government.
Nope. There's no real United States of America.
There's no real United States as far as we know it today. And that's one reason why individuals that support it are early on kind of back away from it. And they have the Constitution that has to be created.
Crazy.
In their eyes.
Yes. Josiah Bartlett, New Hampshire, is the second person, by the way, to sign the Declaration of Independence. So John Hancock gets all the credit, but after John Hancock walked away,
who remembers
Josiah Bartlett,
who remembers number 2?
Right, walks up and says, "I got this," and he signs it second. Interesting. Anyway, I mean, I guess this is a nice short conversation on the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, I mean, you can always just like Google the individuals. There's a ton of information on these guys, little bios and stuff like that there. And each one, again, they're putting their life on the line by doing this. So you definitely have to give them that credit. They know that if this is not successful, and there was by no means, a given that this war was going to be successful. You're battling the most powerful nation on earth, the most well-trained, well-equipped army on the planet, and you think you're going to win?
Yeah.
So they're signing and they're aware of the consequences if this doesn't work.
They do it anyway, which is what's great about this. And it's not like they go into hiding. Like they don't go into. I mean, a lot of these guys. Yeah, a lot of these guys were actually caught and arrested and thrown into like British jail during this time. But they're just like, yeah, we're doing this. I mean, it is what it is.
I saw one more interesting I don't bring up. There actually was signed shortly after this. A Declaration of Independence was signed in New York. Did you see this?
No.
Declaration of Independence in 1777. And it was a group of 547 loyalists from New York that signed this. They pledged their loyalty to the crown. So when they hear about this, they're like, oh, wait a minute, we it's not all of us. So they were like loyalists that pledged their loyalty, that they still support the crown no matter what. At that point, it doesn't matter, right? The war's going on. But
another interesting thing. Do you know that 3, not 2, but 3 of the founding fathers died on 4th of July, which was the anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence? So everyone knows about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson because they died within a few hours of each other on July 4th, 1826, which was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which is crazy because I'm pretty sure they were like some of the last ones that were still alive during this time that have signed it. But James Monroe, President James Monroe, also died on July 4th in 1831. Fun fact.
Look at that. Yeah, but it's not as interesting as a fun fact.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's good. I'll give you some props there.
I was going to say, I thought it was kind of fun.
It's a good way to end.
Nice. All right. So, as always, if anyone needs us, you know where to find us. You could always go to historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. You could find us on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're out there. Just look for us. If anyone has any suggestions, come our way. And I think that concludes our podcast. So I hope everyone has an amazing...
Concludes our 50th podcast.
Indeed, our 50th podcast. So I hope everyone has an amazing week until we get back with number 51.
Let's go.
All right. Enjoy, everyone. Take care.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.